My name is Evan Miller. I'm 33 years old, an architect based in Seattle, Washington. For the past several years, I'd been balancing freelance projects with the dream of launching my own architecture firm. I've always been detail-oriented, quiet, driven by purpose rather than appearance. The kind of guy who prefers sketching blueprints at 2 in the morning over networking at cocktail parties. I was engaged to Sophie Reed. We'd been together since college. She was 31, worked in marketing for a tech startup downtown, and we had what I thought was a solid relationship. We had plans, a wedding date set for late spring 2022, a small house we were looking at in Ballard, normal couple stuff. Then, 8 days before our wedding, Sophie ended it. No warning, no real conversation, just cold, clinical efficiency. We were sitting in our apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes and wedding gifts we hadn't even opened yet, when she told me she needed stability and that I lived on promises. Her exact words, like she'd rehearsed them. 3 months later, she was engaged to Richard Coleman. Richard was 61 years old, a real estate developer who'd made his money flipping commercial properties across the Pacific Northwest. He owned Brightwave Construction, the same company I'd done freelance architectural work for over the past 2 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man now sleeping with my ex-fiancée had signed my paychecks. Sophie's Instagram exploded overnight. Suddenly it was all first-class flights to Cabo, front-row seats at Seahawks games, charity galas at the Four Seasons. Every post dripped with the same message: look what I upgraded to. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. I want to be clear about something. I didn't fall apart. I didn't drink myself stupid or burn her stuff or send pathetic late-night texts. I just went back to work. Looking back, there were signs I'd ignored. About 6 months before the breakup, Sophie started making comments. Little digs about how we couldn't afford the restaurants her co-workers went to, how her friend Jessica's boyfriend had just bought her a new Audi, how she was tired of explaining to her family why we were still renting. I thought it was stress, wedding planning pressure. I didn't realize she was comparing our entire relationship to a balance sheet and deciding I wasn't liquid enough. The day after she returned the ring, I sat down and made a decision. I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to build exactly what I'd always planned to build, just faster and better than I'd originally imagined. I founded Miller Form Studio 6 weeks after the breakup in June 2022. Sustainable architecture with a focus on functionality over flash. My first major contract was a residential project in Bellevue. Nothing glamorous, but I executed it flawlessly. Word spread. Within 18 months, I'd landed a hotel renovation contract in Tacoma, then another in Spokane. The work was good. Clean lines, energy efficiency, spaces that actually made sense for how people lived and worked. By early 2024, Miller Form Studio had a growing reputation in the Pacific Northwest hospitality sector. We weren't the biggest firm, but we were becoming known for delivering on time, under budget, and with innovative solutions that actually worked. Then I got the call about the Leavenworth project. The Alpine Rose Hotel was a historic property built in 1924, recently acquired by a luxury hotel group looking to restore it to its original grandeur while modernizing the infrastructure. It was the biggest project my firm had handled. The kind of contract that could define a company's trajectory. I accepted immediately. It wasn't until 2 weeks into the design phase that I found out Richard Coleman and Sophie Reed had booked the Alpine Rose for their wedding. They'd reserved the entire property for a weekend in September 2024. The coincidence was almost funny. Almost. When Richard discovered I was the lead architect on the restoration, he called me personally. His voice had that practiced warmth rich people use when they want to seem gracious. "Evan, I heard you're working on the Alpine Rose project. Excellent work, by the way. Sophie and I are getting married there in September. I'd like to personally invite you to attend." No hard feelings, right? Water under the bridge. I paused for exactly 3 seconds. "Sure, Richard, I'll be there." He seemed pleased with himself, like he'd just demonstrated some grand magnanimity. In reality, he'd just proven he had no idea who he was dealing with. I hung up and went back to the blueprints. The Alpine Rose project consumed my attention from March through August 2024. The building itself was a masterpiece of 1920s Bavarian-inspired architecture, but decades of neglect had taken their toll. We were gutting the electrical systems, reinforcing the foundation, restoring the original woodwork while installing modern HVAC and plumbing that wouldn't be visible to guests. I made the 2-hour drive from Seattle to Leavenworth at least twice a week, sometimes staying overnight to supervise critical phases of the work. The town itself was surreal. This German-themed village tucked into the Cascade Mountains that looked like someone had airlifted a piece of Bavaria into Washington state. It was during one of these site visits in early April, about a month into the project, that I met Lily Coleman. She was in the main ballroom, carefully photographing a series of damaged murals that dated back to the hotel's opening. She had a professional camera setup, notebook, the whole thing. When she noticed me, she lowered the camera and smiled. "You must be Evan Miller. I'm Lily Coleman. I'm doing the art curation for the restoration." Coleman. The name registered immediately, but I kept my expression neutral. "Nice to meet you. Those murals are in rough shape." "They are," she said, moving closer to show me her documentation. "But they're salvageable. The original artist was a German immigrant named Ernst Müller. He did several hotels in the region. These pieces alone could be worth preserving as historical artifacts, not just decoration." We talked for 20 minutes about the restoration approach, about maintaining historical integrity while meeting modern safety codes, about the balance between preservation and functionality. She knew her material. More importantly, she understood the broader vision of what we were trying to accomplish. It wasn't until later that I learned she was Richard Coleman's niece, his younger brother's daughter. She was 27, had moved to Seattle 3 years earlier after finishing her master's degree in art history at UC Berkeley. The hotel group had hired her specifically for the Alpine Rose project because of her expertise in early 20th century Pacific Northwest art. Over the following weeks, Lily and I worked closely together. The restoration required constant coordination between my team's structural work and her preservation efforts. We'd meet on site, review progress, troubleshoot problems. Coffee meetings turned into working lunches. Professional conversations started including personal details. She mentioned, almost in passing, that she rarely saw her Uncle Richard, that their family connection was distant, more obligatory than genuine. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. By mid-June, our relationship had shifted into something beyond professional courtesy. Nothing dramatic, no movie moment. Just two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company and respected each other's work. We started meeting for dinner after site visits. She showed me her favorite spots in Leavenworth, the places tourists never found. I told her about Miller Form Studios' projects, about the challenges of building a firm from scratch. One evening, sitting at a small German restaurant overlooking the Wenatchee River, she asked about my personal life. I'd been careful to avoid mentioning Sophie or the wedding, but Lily was perceptive. "You know about the September wedding at the hotel, don't you?" she asked. I set down my beer. "I do. Richard's my uncle. Sophie's going to be my aunt, technically." She paused. "I've met her a few times. She's not what I expected." "Meaning?" "Meaning she seems more interested in the lifestyle than the person providing it." Lily held my gaze. "Richard mentioned you were invited to the wedding. He seemed weirdly proud of that fact, like he'd won something." I smiled despite myself. "He probably thinks he has. Has he?" "No." We didn't discuss it further that night, but something had been acknowledged between us, an understanding that we were both aware of the situation's complexity, and neither of us particularly cared about the optics. By July, Lily and I were officially dating. We kept it quiet, professional on site, but anyone paying attention could probably tell. The project was going exceptionally well. We were ahead of schedule and under budget. The hotel ownership was thrilled. My firm's reputation was growing with every successful phase completion. And then Sophie found out about Lily. I don't know how. Maybe she saw something on social media. Maybe Richard mentioned it. Maybe she just asked the right questions. But in early August, my phone rang with a number I'd deleted but still recognized. "Evan, it's Sophie. We need to talk." I was in my office in Seattle, reviewing permit applications. I put her on speaker and kept working. "About what?" "About you dating Richard's niece. Are you serious?" "Pretty serious, yeah." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end, trying to compose herself. "That's incredibly inappropriate. You're working on our wedding venue, and you're sleeping with his family member?" "Lily and I are both adults. Richard invited me to your wedding. I accepted. I don't see the problem. The problem is that you're trying to make this awkward for me." I stopped typing and leaned back in my chair. "Sophie, I'm going to say this once. I didn't plan any of this. I took a project. I met someone. We connected. Your wedding, your choices, your relationship with Richard, none of that factors into my life anymore. You made sure of that. I made a practical decision, Evan. I needed security. And you got it. Congratulations." "Was there anything else?" She hung up without answering. I went back to the permit applications and didn't think about the call again until later that week, when Richard himself reached out. Not a phone call this time. An email. Professional, measured, but with an undercurrent of something else. Concern, maybe. Or control. The email thanked me for my continued excellent work on the Alpine Rose project and mentioned that he was aware of my relationship with Lily. He wrote that he hoped it wouldn't complicate the professional dynamic and that he was looking forward to seeing me at the wedding. I replied within an hour. Short, professional. Confirmed that the project remained on track and that I'd see him in September. What Richard and Sophie didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Brightwave Construction was facing serious financial problems. I'd heard rumors through industry contacts, delayed payments to subcontractors, canceled projects. Richard had overextended himself on a commercial development in Spokane that hadn't attracted the tenants he'd projected. The man who'd represented stability to Sophie was quietly hemorrhaging money. I didn't need to do anything with that information. I just filed it away and kept working. The Alpine Rose restoration was completed 2 weeks before the wedding in late August. The final result was stunning. Original murals restored, modern amenities seamlessly integrated, the entire property radiating the exact balance of historical charm and contemporary luxury that the ownership had requested. Lily's work on the art curation had been exceptional. The hotel group offered her a permanent consulting position. She had accepted. My firm received full payment plus a performance bonus. We were immediately contracted for 2 additional properties in the same hotel group's portfolio. Everything was falling into place. And then September arrived. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, September 14th. Lily and I drove up to Leavenworth together on Friday afternoon. The Alpine Rose looked spectacular. The restoration had transformed it into exactly what it was meant to be, a jewel of Pacific Northwest hospitality architecture. We checked into our room, a corner suite on the 3rd floor with a view of the mountains. Lily had been quiet during the drive, and I could tell she was processing the strangeness of the situation. Her uncle's wedding, my ex-fiancée becoming her aunt, the fact that we were attending together. "You okay?" I asked, setting down our bags. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me. "I keep thinking about how weird this is going to be tomorrow. Richard's side of the family barely knows me. Sophie's going to be watching us all night. And honestly, I'm just trying to figure out why we're even going. We're going because Richard invited me, and turning down that invitation would have looked like I cared. I don't. And you're going because you're family, and not showing up would have caused more drama than just attending." "Very rational," she said with a slight smile. "I'm an architect. Rational is kind of my thing." We had dinner that night at a restaurant in town, away from the hotel and the wedding preparation chaos. Lily told me about her family, about growing up in Portland, about her complicated relationship with the Coleman side of her family. Richard had always been the wealthy uncle who showed up to holidays with expensive gifts, but no real interest in actual connection. He called me once after I took this job, she said, asked if I was involved with anyone on the project team. I told him I was dating the lead architect. There was this long pause, and then he just said, "I see," and changed the subject. Did he know who I was at that point? Oh, he knew. He said your name. He just didn't want to acknowledge the situation directly. I thought about that. Richard's invitation to the wedding, his careful email about maintaining professionalism, his need to appear magnanimous while quietly trying to assert control. The man operated entirely through gestures and implications. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, I said. That's one word for it. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, temperature in the mid-70s, the kind of September day that makes people forget Seattle's reputation for rain. The wedding was scheduled for 4 o'clock in the hotel's garden terrace, with the reception following in the main ballroom. Lily and I spent the morning walking around Leavenworth, deliberately avoiding the hotel until we had to be there. We got coffee, browsed the tourist shops, acted like a normal couple doing normal things. It felt good, grounding. We returned to the hotel around 2:30 to get ready. I put on a charcoal gray suit. Nothing flashy, just well-tailored and professional. Lily wore a navy dress that was elegant without trying to compete with wedding party attire. We both understood the assignment. Be present, be appropriate, don't create drama. By 3:45, guests were gathering on the terrace. I recognized several people from Seattle's business community. Brightwave construction employees, Sophie's marketing friends, Richard's attorney, the usual crowd for this kind of event. We found seats toward the back, on the groom's side. Lily nodded to a few family members, kept conversations brief. I stayed quiet, observing. At exactly 4 o'clock, the music started. Richard walked out first, accompanied by his best man. He looked older than 61. The stress of the past year had clearly taken a toll. His suit was expensive, probably custom, but it couldn't hide the weight loss or the fatigue in his posture. Then Sophie appeared. She looked beautiful. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The dress was stunning. Her hair and makeup were flawless, and she moved down the aisle with the confidence of someone who'd gotten exactly what she wanted. But when her eyes swept across the assembled guests and landed on me, sitting next to Lily, calm, completely unbothered, something shifted in her expression. Just for a moment. A micro-expression of surprise, followed by something that might have been regret or might have been anger. Then she recovered and kept walking. The ceremony itself was standard. Traditional vows, readings about love and commitment, the usual promises that people make when they're convinced this time will be different. I didn't feel anything watching it. No jealousy, no vindication. Nothing. It was just a wedding. What I did notice was the body language. Sophie kept glancing at Richard during the ceremony, like she was checking to make sure he was still there. Richard kept his attention fixed forward, his expression difficult to read. They didn't look at each other the way people in love look at each other. They looked like two people executing a transaction. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, things got more interesting. Lily and I were at the bar when Sophie approached. She'd ditched the bouquet somewhere and was holding a glass of champagne, her smile tight and practiced. "Evan, thank you for coming." "Congratulations, Sophie." Her eyes moved to Lily. "And you must be Lily. I've heard so much about you." "Likewise," Lily said evenly. "The restoration work you saw today, that was a collaboration. Evan's vision, my curation. Turned out well." Sophie's smile didn't reach her eyes. It did. Richard was very impressed with the results. She paused. "I didn't know you two were serious. Richard mentioned you were dating, but seeing you here together..." "We're very serious," I said simply. She took a sip of champagne, and I watched her trying to process the reality in front of her. The man she'd left for living on promises was now more successful, more stable, and more genuinely content than she'd probably expected. And he was here with someone younger, smarter, and more professionally accomplished than she was. "Well," Sophie said finally, "I'm glad you're doing well. Richard's been telling everyone about your firm's success. He's proud to have worked with you." The irony of that statement, Richard taking credit for my success while marrying the woman who'd left me, was almost too much. "That's generous of him," I said. Sophie's mask slipped for just a second. I saw the calculation behind her eyes, the mental math she was doing, comparing what she had to what she'd given up. Then someone called her name, and she excused herself, smile strained. Lily exhaled slowly once Sophie was gone. That was brutal. That was necessary. The reception started at 6. Dinner was served, speeches were made. The usual wedding reception choreography played out. Richard's best man told stories about their college days. Sophie's maid of honor talked about how Sophie always knew what she wanted and never settled. During dinner, I noticed Richard watching me from the head table. Not obviously, just occasional glances like he was trying to figure something out. At one point, he leaned over and whispered something to Sophie. She shook her head slightly, her expression tight. After dinner, during the dancing portion of the evening, one of Richard's business associates stopped by our table. His name was David, a commercial real estate broker I'd met through previous projects. "Evan, good to see you. Didn't expect you'd be here." Richard invited me. I accepted. David glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Can I be honest? Richard's in a tough spot right now. That Spokane project collapsed. He's got creditors circling. Brightwave's barely staying afloat." "I'd heard rumors," I said carefully. "More than rumors. He put everything into that development, and the anchor tenant pulled out last month. He's leveraged to the point where one more bad quarter could sink him." David paused. "I'm telling you this because you might want to be careful about any future contracts with Brightwave." I nodded slowly. "I appreciate the heads up." After David left, Lily met my gaze. "Did you know about that?" "I knew he was having problems. I didn't know how bad." "Does Sophie know?" "If she does, she's pretending she doesn't." We stayed until 9:30, which felt like an appropriate amount of time to demonstrate we'd attended in good faith without overstaying. As we were leaving, Richard approached us near the exit. "Evan, Lily, thank you for coming. Beautiful ceremony," I said. "Congratulations again." Richard nodded, but his eyes were tired. Up close, the strain was even more visible. This wasn't a man celebrating. This was a man going through the motions. "The hotel looks incredible. You did outstanding work." "Team effort," I said, gesturing to Lily. He looked at his niece, and something complicated passed between them. Family obligation, professional respect, the unspoken acknowledgement that she'd chosen my side of whatever this was. "Take care of yourself, Uncle Richard," Lily said quietly. We left without looking back. We drove back to Seattle that night instead of staying over. Neither of us wanted to be there for the Sunday brunch or any extended wedding festivities. The drive was quiet for the first hour, both of us processing what we'd just witnessed. Finally, Lily broke the silence. "That was the saddest wedding I've ever attended." "Yeah." "She looked at you the entire night. Did you notice?" I had noticed. Every time I glanced toward the head table, Sophie's eyes were somewhere in my direction. Not obvious staring, just constant awareness, like she couldn't help herself. "She made a choice," I said. "She gets to live with it. Do you feel vindicated?" I thought about that question for several miles, watching the dark shapes of the Cascade Mountains fade behind us. "No, I feel relieved, like I dodged something I didn't even know was coming." "What do you mean?" "If Sophie hadn't left, I probably would have married her. We would have had a decent life, nothing spectacular, and I never would have known that she was capable of walking away the moment something shinier came along. Now I know. And more importantly, I'm with someone who chose me for reasons that actually matter." Lily reached over and squeezed my hand. We didn't talk much after that, but it felt like something had been settled between us. A shared understanding that what we had was real, in a way that whatever Sophie and Richard had assembled definitely wasn't. Life returned to normal over the following weeks. Miller Form Studio was busier than ever. We'd landed 2 more hotel projects and were being courted for a mixed-use development in Bellevue. I hired 3 new architects and moved the firm into a larger office space in Capitol Hill. Lily's career was taking off too. The hotel group that owned the Alpine Rose, offered her a permanent position as their director of historical preservation. She had accepted and started consulting on properties across Washington and Oregon. We moved in together in October 2024, finding a townhouse in Fremont with enough space for both our home offices. It happened naturally, without the pressure or performance that had characterized my relationship with Sophie. Just two people building something real. I didn't hear from Sophie or Richard directly after the wedding, but information filtered through the industry grapevine. Brightwave Construction filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in November 2024. The Spokane project was officially dead, and Richard was selling off assets to avoid complete financial collapse. In December, I heard through a mutual contact that Sophie had gone back to work, full-time, at a mid-level marketing position with a startup that couldn't afford her previous salary demands. Apparently, the luxury lifestyle had ended rather abruptly when Richard's financial situation became impossible to hide. I didn't take pleasure in any of that. I just noted it and moved on. What I did take pleasure in was the life I was actually building. Miller Form Studio won a Regional Design Award in January 2025 for the Alpine Rose restoration. The recognition led to national press coverage and inquiries from hotel groups across the country. Lily and I got engaged in February 2025 on a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands. No drama, no performance, just a conversation about wanting to build a life together, and a ring I'd been carrying for 3 weeks waiting for the right moment. We set a date for October 2025, giving us plenty of time to plan something small and meaningful. Neither of us wanted a big production. Just family and close friends, somewhere that mattered to us. In March 2025, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Evan, it's Sophie." I hadn't heard her voice in 6 months. I put down the site plans I'd been reviewing and leaned back in my chair. "Sophie, what can I do for you?" There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, trying to figure out how to say whatever she'd called to say. I wanted to apologize for how I handled things, for what I said when I ended our engagement, for everything. "Okay. That's it, just okay? What do you want me to say, Sophie? That I forgive you? Fine, I forgive you. That I understand? I don't, but it doesn't matter anymore. I made a mistake, Evan. I thought Richard represented security, but all he represented was the appearance of security. I should have trusted what we were building." I stood up and walked to my office window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "You made the choice you thought was right at the time. I'm not going to tell you it was wrong or right, but I will tell you that I'm grateful you made it." "Grateful?" "Yeah, because if you hadn't left, I'd be married to someone who valued the wrong things, and I wouldn't have met Lily." Another long silence. "I heard you got engaged. Congratulations." "Thank you. Is she good to you?" "She's everything I didn't know I needed." "I'm happy for you, Evan. I mean that. I believe you. Take care of yourself, Sophie." I hung up before she could respond. There wasn't anything else to say. No anger left, no resentment, just complete indifference. The best kind of closure. I never told Lily about that call. It didn't seem relevant. Sophie was part of a previous chapter, and that chapter was closed. Miller Form Studio continued to grow throughout the spring and summer of 2025. We opened a second office in Portland and hired 2 more senior architects. The firm had become exactly what I'd envisioned when I started it. A respected name in sustainable, functional design with a reputation for delivering exceptional work. We're planning our wedding for October, about a month from now. We chose a small venue on Orcas Island, invited 40 people, and kept everything simple and personal. My parents will be there. Lily's immediate family, close friends, key colleagues, people who actually matter to us. Looking back now, I can see the whole thing clearly. Sophie didn't betray me. She revealed herself. She showed me exactly who she was and what she valued, and she did it early enough that I could build something real, with someone who valued the same things I did. Richard didn't win anything. He bought a trophy wife with money he didn't actually have, and when the money disappeared, so did the illusion. I didn't get revenge. I just lived long enough for the truth to become obvious. The best revenge isn't a plan or a scheme or some elaborate setup. It's building a life so genuine that everyone who doubted you has to watch you thrive. It's becoming so secure in who you are that their opinions stop mattering. It's finding someone who chooses you for real reasons, not convenient ones. Sophie chose security. She got appearance instead. I chose purpose. I got everything else. And that's the thing about betrayal. Sometimes the person who walks away doesn't realize they're setting you free. They think they're leaving you behind, but really they're just clearing the path for something better. I'm 36 now, telling this story in September 2025. Miller Form Studio has 15 employees and projects in 4 states. Lily's career is thriving. We bought a house in Madison Park with a view of Lake Washington. We're talking about starting a family after the wedding. Sophie's still with Richard, as far as I know. They're still married, still maintaining whatever arrangement they've built. I don't follow her on social media anymore. I don't check in on how they're doing. I genuinely don't care. Because here's what I learned. The best life isn't the one that looks impressive from the outside. It's the one that feels right from the inside. And every single day, I wake up next to someone who chose me when it meant something, who built this life with me brick by brick, who values the work more than the showcase. That's not revenge. That's just winning. And maybe that's what real revenge looks like. Not bitterness, but peace. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and leave a comment letting me know what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.